Let's go. Today I'm talking about the 2023 film Everything Will Be Fine in the End. As always, this review is going to be spoiler free, so if you like what you see, feel free to subscribe to the channel and like the video. This movie's plot is hard to summarize, but I'll do my best. A young woman in an urban neighborhood has her dog stolen, so she enlists the help of her two best friends to track the dog down and get revenge on the man who wronged her. But in their quest, things go violently awry, and the utter aimlessness of their lives begins to come increasingly to the surface. This movie is obviously very low budget, made by relatively proficient but still amateur filmmakers, so this is definitely not Hollywood grade stuff, just, to set your expectations right from the start. But that's not always necessarily a bad thing, because seriously, like, screw Hollywood nowadays. Hollywood is just putting out a bunch of crap, so it's like we do need indie filmmakers who are a little bit more amateur to come in and step in and do something new, do something interesting. And the question is, does this movie do that? The way this movie tells its story is anything but traditional. It's definitely absurd and surreal by design, and I think that works to varying effect. I'll get into it. From the start, the movie jumps right in. I'm used to skipping the opening credits or the opening company logos and all that kind of stuff, but I was actually really pleasantly surprised to see that this movie jumps directly in at like the 6-second mark into a cold open. And it is very disorienting in the beginning, but I do eventually kind of get my bearings and I'm able to basically follow the plot of the movie. But I did want to just compliment that off the bat, that it doesn't go through like an hour of credits before we finally get into the movie. This movie definitely has a style that it's going for, from the music choices to the editing to the weird title cards that just kind of randomly pop up throughout the movie that I'm not quite sure the meaning or purpose behind. It definitely has a style. I'm not always sure exactly what they're going for, but there are a lot of moments that feel kind of familiar, maybe kind of something like Tarantino, I'm not exactly sure. But these stylistic choices are pulled off to varying degrees of success throughout the movie. There are scenes where I really enjoy the energy of the movie, and it's a lot of fun, but there are also scenes where the movie feels really overly stylized and kind of pretentious, and almost like it's doing this stuff as a way of avoiding just telling a story. I'm just gonna say it, this movie is not very well written. I feel like these filmmakers don't really know how to tell a coherent story at times. Characters are introduced in weird and confusing ways that don't really give the audience the information that we need. And the plot often goes to places that feel arbitrary and add very little to the overall narrative. Like the moment where this movie randomly turns into a porno for about 3 minutes. Still, even with how surreal this movie is, by the end of the movie, I could see the story that the movie is telling, and that story isn't terrible. It's just poorly told. I also wanted to mention the dialogue, which is terrible, and it's one of the worst things about the writing and one of the worst things about the movie. As far as the acting goes, the three leads, Elsa Kennedy, Stephen Martin, and Cheska Zade, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, they mostly work in their roles. I don't think they really pull off the moments where the script tries to dive deeper into character development, but I kind of appreciate those moments for being there in the movie nonetheless. But unfortunately, almost all the supporting characters after them are pretty terrible, not gonna lie. But there is one more performance I want to highlight in the movie, and that is the performance of Kent Harper. This guy is absolutely insane in this movie. And sometimes I love it, sometimes I don't. But this guy is turned up to 12 at all times in this movie. I think with the right connections, he could be like the next Nick Cage or something. He gets some of the most hilarious lines of dialogue in the movie, but he also goes so over the top and so far across the line at certain points that it's just too absurd, and it just becomes just kind of cringy, honestly. The last thing I want to talk about is the ending of the movie. I obviously can't give specific details, but the title of the movie is basically a spoiler for the ending. Everything will be fine in the end. It honestly reminds me of movie titles like The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. And there's something about that. I like movies that kind of telegraph the ending through the title, from the beginning before you even go into the movie. Because, the ending is what you're supposed to know. What you don't know is how they get to that ending and how exactly that ending is going to play out. But I gotta say, the way that the title ties into the movie and ties into the ending, I do really like it. And I walked away from the ending with a good taste in my mouth. So, even though I didn't love the movie overall, I do have a lot of goodwill for these filmmakers and this cast, and I hope that in the future they're able to find success and bigger budgets. In my opinion, this movie's a 4 out of 10.